We're the last of our kind, but it wasn't always so. Although today we walk the Earth alone as Homo sapiens, for much of our planet's history we weren't the only human species around. Today we'll explore how, up until about 40,000 years ago, we shared the planet with our cousins. Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, the tiny hobbits of Flores, and many other species stretching back millions of years. We'll see sister branches, distant cousins, and lineages that flourished, interbred with us, and in the end, faded away. This documentary sets out to show that human evolution wasn't a ladder but a branching tree. And in the end, we'll tackle two big questions. How did a world once crowded with human species come to be inhabited by only one? And why are we the ones left? To understand our lost relatives, we have to go back to Africa, farther back than we usually imagine. Between 7 and 6 million years ago, in savannas and woodlands, a lineage split from chimpanzees and bonobos. These weren't yet humans, but precursors. Creatures that used their hands and feet in mixed ways, climbed trees, and perhaps were already trying out bipedal walking. Over time, those attempts became a habit. From there, countless experiments in humanness unfolded. A little over 4 million years ago in Ethiopia lived Ardipithecus ramidus, bipedal on the ground yet comfortable in the trees. A million years later, Australopithecus afarensis, the famous Lucy, walked the savanna. In today's Tanzania, the Letoli footprints give us the earliest, clearest snapshot of bipedalism. Bare feet in a line, pressed into hardened ash as if their owners had just passed by. Meanwhile, at Lomekwi, west of Lake Turkana in Kenya, someone was shaping stones. These tools predate the genus Homo, technology getting ahead of the human label, crude pieces, deliberately made that push back the moment when technical behavior began among the would-be humans. Those early forms didn't fail. They succeeded in their own ways and endured for hundreds of thousands of years. Each was a trial run, an experiment that molded what humanity could become. Then came a leap. With Homo habilis, stone knapping became routine. The first stone tools were essentially flakes sharp enough to butcher meat. Fire wasn't yet under control, but technology had begun. Diets changed to meat, marrow, and roots. Brains grew little by little. Bodies adapted to walking long distances. A million years later came Homo erectus, tall, long-striding with proportions closer to ours, shoulders built for throwing, and a pelvis built for walking and running. Its brain was nearly twice the size of Australopithecus. But erectus didn't just make Acheulean hand axes. It became the world's first great traveler, spreading out of Africa into Asia and Europe. Skulls 1.8 million years old from Dmanisi, Georgia, record the earliest expansion into Eurasia. It was Homo erectus that finally mastered fire, built shelters, and hunted in coordinated groups. Some of its lineages lasted nearly 2 million years, far longer than modern humans have existed. Now picture a night 500,000 years ago, a campfire, shadows dancing across a cave wall, a Homo erectus family warming themselves, children hypnotized by the flames. Contrary to what many think, Homo erectus wasn't an ape. On Java, today's Indonesia, one of them engraved a zigzag pattern onto a shell around 500,000 years ago. We don't know if it was art or a mark, but it was intentional, and it took a steady hand and a planning mind. They were creatures of culture and invention, perhaps even capable of speech in sounds we might not recognize today, but communicating nonetheless. Those were the foundations, and still they weren't alone. Around the same time, other variants appeared. Homo heidelbergensis and Homo naledi in the caves of South Africa, and a little later the relatives who would become our most famous cousins, the Neanderthals. Look back into Europe and Western Asia and you'll see Neanderthals, powerfully built, with broad chests and limbs adapted to the cold. For more than 300,000 years they thrived in icy plains and dense forests. Their brains were as large as ours. They made sophisticated tools, buried their dead, and even painted cave walls with symbols. For centuries, we mocked them as brutish cavemen, but that myth has crumbled. Neanderthals weren't stupid. They had a different kind of intelligence. They could pass knowledge down, teaching one another how to make tools. They even made glue, distilling birch tar from tree bark to haft their tools. They crafted personal ornaments, and in Spanish caves, they left rock art that predates the arrival of sapiens. Neanderthals were a different answer to the question of what it means to be human. Did they meet sapiens? Yes, and they mixed. Today, almost everyone with non-African ancestry carries between 1% and 2% Neanderthal DNA, a legacy that affects immunity, skin, and metabolism. It isn't genetic contamination, it's shared heritage. For decades, no one knew that across the vastness of Asia, another humanity had woven its own story. Far to the east, in Russia's remote Altai Mountains, lived a people we discovered only in 2010, the Denisovans. Researchers unearthed a tiny finger bone. At first it seemed trivial, just another fossil in the dirt. But when scientists sequenced its DNA, the results were astonishing. The bone didn't belong to Homo sapiens. It wasn't Neanderthal either. It was something else, a new kind of human. We have few complete Denisovan bones, but their DNA told the story of a powerful people who ranged widely, from Siberia's frozen steppes to the high Tibetan plateau, leaving genetic traces across Asia. They interbred with us, and their heritage endures, especially in Melanesia, Papua New Guinea, Tibet, and Australia. One of their most famous legacies is a gene linked to high-altitude adaptation found in Tibetans, a direct sign that the Denisovans conquered those heights long before we did. Imagine it, people walking around today with echoes of a vanished humanity woven into their blood. We don't have complete skeletons, not even a skull, so we can only imagine their appearance. Perhaps they were robust, with features partway between Neanderthals and us. Their looks remain one of prehistory's great enigmas. They weren't primitive. In the cave that bears their name, researchers found sophisticated tools and even jewelry made from polished green stone, objects that hint at creativity, intelligence, and symbolic thought, qualities we once arrogantly claimed as ours alone. Their story isn't just about survival, it's about encounters. Wherever modern humans traveled in Asia, we see Denisovan traces. We didn't live in isolation. We met them. We mixed. Sometimes we loved. Fossils and DNA have let us glimpse more. The genome of a teenage individual revealed a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father. A first-generation hybrid, a genetic snapshot of our point all along. Human origins weren't pure, but a braided mosaic. On the Indonesian island of Flores lived another human barely a meter tall, Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbit. Discovered in 2003 in Liangbua Cave, the remains included an adult barely 1 meter tall with a brain no larger than an orange. At first, many thought it was a sick Homo sapiens, but close analysis showed otherwise, a distinct species, not children, not deformed humans, adults, miniature people who thrived on the island for hundreds of thousands of years. The discovery rocked science to its core and rewrote what it means to be human. Small as they were, these hobbits used stone tools, hunted pygmy elephants, and survived until at least 50,000 years ago, just as Homo sapiens reached the region. But that raises unsettling questions. Did sapiens meet the hobbits? If so, what happened? Did we absorb them, outcompete them, or wipe them out? Perhaps their small, isolated population simply couldn't withstand the arrival of outsiders. Small and enigmatic, another branch of the human family. Where did they come from? The leading idea is that they descended from Homo erectus, who arrived by water on natural rafts more than 800,000 years ago, and then shrank through island dwarfism, a common ecological adaptation. Fewer resources, fewer predators, smaller bodies. Brains still effective. Years later, in 2019, scientists announced another cousin, Homo luzonensis from Callao Cave in the Philippines. Small in stature with a curious mix of ancient and modern traits, curved fingers suggesting climbing and peculiar teeth. We don't yet know their full story, but we do know they overlapped in time with sapiens and perhaps with denisovans in the region, proof that the human family tree is more tangled than we ever imagined. There's another overlooked truth. Long before Neanderthals and before Denisovans, another species ranged across Europe and Africa, Homo heidelbergensis. By our standards, they were giants, tall, muscular, with thick bones built for endurance. Many scientists think they were the direct ancestors of Neanderthals in Europe and of us, Homo sapiens, in Africa. Meanwhile, at Atapuerca in Spain, Homo antecessor occupied another rung on Europe's tree, perhaps close to the split that would lead to Neanderthals and sapiens. Recent biomolecular analyses place it as a sister group near the lineage that later gave rise to both. They weren't alone. In Asia, fossils point to even stranger colossi, Meganthropus, with jaws so massive, early researchers thought they belonged to apes. These giants dominated forests and plains hundreds of thousands of years ago, and yet, like so many others, they vanished, leaving only skull fragments and quiet questions. Who were these lost giants? An especially robust erectus? Or just shadows, stepping stones toward humans yet to come? With so little complete anatomy, we should be cautious about overdrawing these colossi. What we do know is that mid-Pleistocene Earth teemed with robust humanities that hunted, napped, and endured. Just when we thought the tale of human diversity was complete, another chapter surfaced from China. In 2012, in a cave in Yunnan province, researchers unearthed unusual human fossils. At first, no one knew where to put them. Not Neanderthals, not Denisovans, not modern humans. Something in between, the Red Deer cave people. Their skulls were thick and heavy, faces wide with prominent jaws and flat noses. Their cranial vaults were smaller than ours, more primitive, and yet the bones were surprisingly recent, as little as 14,000 years old. That meant that as civilizations were beginning to rise, these strange people were still walking the earth. Their existence shatters any simplistic view of human evolution. Long after Neanderthals disappeared, there were still other humans alive, people who didn't look like us, but lived parallel lives. Imagine it, a population part archaic, part modern, living at the same time as our ancestors, like a living relic lingering in Asia's forests while the rest of the world moved on. Their puzzling anatomy raised a hard question. Were they a wholly new human species, or simply an isolated branch of Homo sapiens that retained ancient traits? Some experts argued for a distinct human lineage, perhaps a late cousin like the hobbits or the Denisovans. Others thought they were modern humans who had mixed with archaic groups, carrying those ancient features far into recent times. The truth remains unresolved. But one thing is clear. Perhaps they faded because of us. Perhaps climate change broke their fragile balance. Or perhaps, like the Denisovans, they still live on as shadows in our DNA. Our species, Homo sapiens, didn't spring up overnight or in a single tiny Eden. The African record tells a broader story going back over 300,000 years, suggesting sapiens emerged through a pan-African process, with connected populations sharing innovations and genes across a continental mosaic. And when did we leave Africa? There were several waves. Sapiens fossils from Mislia, Israel, and Apidima, Greece, point to early exits that may not have lasted. The expansion that stuck happened about 60,000 years ago, when small groups of modern humans moved into Eurasia. But those lands weren't empty. We encountered Neanderthals in the west and Denisovans in the east, and we mixed with both. Our species carries the echoes of those ancient meetings. We are not pure, we are hybrids. When our ancestors met their cousins, it wasn't always clubs and spears. We like to tell stories of harmony, peaceful coexistence, but not always. The planet wasn't infinite. Valleys, rivers, caves, everything had owners. When two species met, survival wasn't guaranteed. Maybe sapiens pushed Neanderthals off their hunting grounds. Maybe Denisovans were forced higher and higher until only fragments of their DNA remained. Bones tell of trauma, spears that found not prey, but kin. The land remembers conflict, quiet but undeniable. In the end, competition was as much a cause of extinction as time, disease, or disaster. Humanity was relentless. Other times, they shared intimacy. What does that mean for us? Those unions shaped us in subtle ways, bolstering our immune systems against new diseases, helping us survive cold or high altitude. We are stitched together from many lineages. Without Neanderthals and Denisovans, our survival might not have been assured. The age of hybrids wasn't a brief moment, but a long dance across continents. Encounters repeated again and again, leaving genetic marks that persist. Even when some groups vanished, they weren't erased. They live in us today, woven into our blood, our bones, our breath. When you look in the mirror, you don't see just Homo sapiens. You see a living archive of every human we ever met. The burning question is this: why us? The honest answers are multiple and not mutually exclusive. There are many theories. Perhaps language, our ability to weave complex symbols into shared meanings. Perhaps culture, art, ritual, cooperation. Perhaps luck. Some extinctions weren't lost wars but survived disasters. Climate swings, volcanic eruptions, and dwindling resources tipping a fragile balance. Population size mattered too. Small groups are vulnerable to disease, drought, and competition for resources. On islands like Flores and Luzon, or in extreme environments, any imbalance could push you to the brink. Glacial and interglacial swings cut and pasted landscapes on a continental scale. Migration routes shifted. Prey came and went. Shorelines rose and fell. Those who could move and innovate had the edge. Sapiens also seem to have excelled at cooperation through symbolic exchanges like language, ritual, and art, which fostered alliances and long-distance knowledge networks. That doesn't mean our cousins lacked symbols. It may simply be that our social system was more scalable. In Europe, Neanderthal extinction ultimately coincided with Sapiens' spread and severe climate episodes. Floresiensis disappears around the time Sapiens enters the region. In the Philippines, Luzonensis doesn't make it into the last 40 millennia. There isn't a single universal culprit. There is a pattern. Small branches couldn't withstand an expansive branch that also absorbed them and took their places. One by one they went extinct, partly absorbed into us, partly into silence. And here we are, the last human species. But in our DNA, in our bones, and in the memories painted on cave walls, the others still live. Now picture a world map with lights flickering, not for cities but for humanities. Lights in icy Europe, in Siberia and the Himalayas. Stubborn, faint lights on tropical islands. African lights everywhere. Yes, only we remain. But we aren't alone. They walk in our genes. They live in our stories. Every fossil lifted from the ground isn't a stranger. It's family. Remembering them isn't nostalgia. It's knowledge. It inoculates us against the hubris of thinking we were inevitable. It reminds us that life thrives in diversity, that cooperation outlasts winter, and that human identity has always been a chorus. So when someone tells you, we've always been the only ones, tell them this. For hundreds of thousands of years, Earth was home to many humanities. Some taught us to endure the cold. Others lent us genes to breathe at altitude. Others showed that intelligence isn't a matter of size. In the end, Sapiens held the stage. But the applause belongs to all. Because the deeper we look into our origins, the more undeniable one truth becomes. Humans didn't just meet, we mingled. We like to think we're on top, that we're the chosen ones. But we aren't the whole story. We're the last survivors of a family that was once large. From Ardi walking upright in the forests, to Lucy crossing the savannah, to Neanderthals defying the Ice Age, to Denisovans whispering in our DNA. Humanity was never singular. Humanity was many. And today we carry them within us, in our bones, in our blood, in the stories we tell by firelight. We are not alone because their shadows still walk with us. We are not a single story. We are a chorus, a family, a legacy of experiments, triumphs, extinctions, and survival. To remember them is to remember a forgotten truth, the time when we were not alone on Earth.